Mr. Ogunye, another issue here has to do with perhaps maybe we can also talk about appointments, because some will say even though the prison is already congested, we already have loads and loads of cases, perhaps the CJN should have directed her comments to the AGs in the states as well as the AGF. But the problem now, or the question is, who appoints the AG or the AGF? So how do you expect the AG or the AGF of states or the federation to even, look into some of these cases, especially when it involves his employer?
Exactly, I'll answer that question, but just a quick. I worry about the ratio of awaiting trial inmates to convicts, but the prison population of Nigeria of 40,000 or thereabout is not out of the ordinary. Why? Because, people have said that if you have 40,000 prisoners in Nigeria, it's either Nigeria is a land of saints, or not, because you have more than that in South Africa. You have more than that elsewhere. So if you have 160-something million people, and you have 40,000 prisoners, and you have criminals all over the place, including criminals in power, who ought to be in prison. So why then will you be saying that the number of prisoners we have are too many? I don't believe that. People have said that if you have this kind of number of prisoners to this population, it's either we are saints or we are allowing criminals to move, to prowl all over the place.
Including ATMs.
Exactly. So I don't agree with that. But speaking directly to the point you made, people have said that it's difficult for the Attorney General to be independent and to work for the people when indeed is appointed by the executive, and that, as it is said in common parlance, he who pays the piper dictates the tune, and that the Attorney General more or less will see himself just like any other minister working in the cabinet. And that's why people have suggested made a number of recommendations. Elsewhere, in some states in the United States, Attorney General are elected. President Clinton, for example, in Arkansas, first served as an Attorney General, and he contested for that office. People have made several suggestions. They talk about the separation of these two offices, as I've said, so that the Attorney General could then be appointed by the CJN, or in a way that will insulate that office from political manipulation and will guarantee that the Attorney General will work for the people, so that even if people in certain governments, do certain things, breach the law, the Attorney General will be willing and ready to prosecute such persons, rather than waiting for the nod of the executive that appointed him before moving.
What about in the states also? Because they also talk about the way judges are appointed at the state level. That if you just look at this AGF matter, may not do sufficient justice to the way judges are appointed in the states.
Well, the way the Attorney General is appointed at the federal level is also the way Attorney General of the states are appointed. And for the judges in the states, what you have is that you have a State Judicial Service Commission that makes recommendation to the NJC. Once the NJC clears, the executive will then appoint. Invariably, the executive plays a very big role in determining who and who becomes a judge. And that's why people are also talking about reform at that level, that the NBA should play a larger role, and so on and so forth. Because as it has happened in some cases, when you talk about elevation, not just appointment, but also elevation of judges to a higher cost, we've seen a situation whereby in the Rivers State Judiciary, for instance, a wife of a particular governor, who was not necessarily the most senior judge in that state, was elevated above his peers to go to the Court of Appeal. And after spending 2 or 3 years in the Court of Appeal, he ended up at the Supreme Court. So you also have that kind of problem. Nepotism has crept in the appointment process, and that is also a challenge. So that's why I've said that when you're dealing with the problem of the judiciary, you have to look at it comprehensively. You may talk about ethical problems. You may talk about the AGF not doing what it's supposed to do, being slow in prosecuting cases and all that. But there are deeper problems, and all these problems ought to be taken together. I have said that we don't have much time. A lifetime is what everybody has, And so when people start talking about we are not where US is today, Rome was not built in a day, those are excuses for failure. Those are rationalization of failure. You don't need to travel the road that US traveled before you got to here. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. What you need to do, the examples are there. Do what is right by yourself, do what is right by your country, and ensure that there is good governance. Because it's all about good governance.
You know, this talk about deliberately delaying cases or deliberately or sometimes tampering with their clients' money, which they also mentioned on that day, is another issue I wanted to expatiate more on. Why would a lawyer, knowing for well we already have more than enough on our plate, deliberately delay this particular or any particular case? Is it to win ultimately at the end, or just to delay till infinity until his client or the next man dies?
You know, I think that there is an over-exaggeration of that problem. Look, if lawyers delay the way they handle cases, mind you, ours is an adversarial system. You have a lawyer representing the plaintiff or the claimant and another lawyer representing the defendant. So a lawyer is not in a position to manipulate proceedings
all by himself.
All by himself. So, and if he's doing that, the judge, the judex, is there to call him to order and to manage the case before him. What we see, and I'm sad to say this, is that rather than blaming lawyers, there are some judges that are not up and doing. You leave Lagos, you go to certain courts outside Lagos, for instance. You may even go to Abuja. I've gone to Abuja, Ilorin, Court of Appeal Division before, and they will not even tell you that they are not sitting. You get there, they are not sitting, you go home. Nobody apologizes to you. Even with the email that you are asked to supply, nobody even calls you. So what you then have to do is to call the registrar. Are they sitting? And the registrar will say that, we don't know, just come. You go there, and then you discover that they are not sitting. No apologies. Judges, some of them behave as if they are gods. We are initiates. We are stakeholders. We go to the court every day. So when people talk about lawyers not, dragging cases and all that, it's exaggerated. But talking about the issue of, fiddling with the monies of clients, that's a serious ethical problem. You're not supposed to commingle the money of clients with your money. You're supposed to have a client account and manage the money. And if a client realizes that you've breached this ethical standard or ethical codes, that client has a right to report you to the Legal Practitioner Disciplinary Committee. And I tell you, the Legal Practitioner Disciplinary Committee, since 1999, has been working, and many, many lawyers have been dealt with. What is been missing, again, is the fact that whereas the Legal Practitioner Disciplinary Committee that has been working, the most gallanted section of the legal profession, the club of the Senior Advocate of Nigeria, have not done what they've are supposed to do. And I'll give you an example, just an example. Because it's easy for you to come to the public domain and say, there's a problem, and then, yes, this is the problem and all that. Homilies. When President Yar'Adua came to power in 2007, before Justice Mustafa Akanbi left office, 3 senior advocates of Nigeria were arraigned in court for what they did or didn't do with INEC. The case was a notorious case. And when President Yar'Adua got to office, before he got to office, God rest his soul, what did he do? There was no sitting attorney general. There was one Professor Anya, senior advocate of Nigeria, who was the Solicitor General in the Ministry of Justice. What did they do? They went and filed a nollie prosecute that they are no longer interested in prosecuting the senior advocate of Nigeria. We drew those cases against them and saw that some of them could become ministers. These people did that. So they don't see that when they go to their high meetings like this to complain. Rather, they just talk about some other issues and say the right things.
Right.
And then you are portrayed as the savior of the legal profession.